Hello and welcome to a very special video today, highly requested by you and those of you who love to listen to this voice while I make up ridiculous baby names. I have been asked by a very special fan to make a long form video like this to help her fall asleep, and I have many of you requesting similar video. So this is what this is. For those of you wondering, who are you? I am your emotionally supportive comedian, Julie Story. I make funny videos on the internet, and one of my characters does help people name their babies using names like Cedar Chest, Tweed, and a mailbox flag. So today I'm going to be helping you fall asleep by reading you a very special children's book that I wrote and illustrated. So not only is it going to help you fall asleep, it might even make you laugh a little bit, especially because I can't help but make jokes, go on random side quests that may or may not have anything to do with the sentence that I just read, and also give behind the scenes insight into anything that pops up into my mind, which I know is the reason you all know and love this channel. So I want you to get comfortable. I want you to grab your holdy pillow, your leg pillow, your neck pillow, your side pillow. Your fan needs to be on. It needs to be at least 61 degrees in your room. You're not listening to white noise tonight. You are listening to me, so that is checked off the list. But also remember, if you do not have the largest glass of water you've ever had in your life sitting next to your bed, you will wake up in the middle of the night the thirstiest that you've ever been. So go ahead and get all of that in place. Lay back, relax, and enjoy this very special reading of Mavery and the Minor Inconveniences. I am a storyteller, surprise to no one. My last name is Story, but when my kids and my niece were young, I would entertain them by telling them stories. And so I wrote this story for my niece for her birthday when she was turning 8 years old. And I also illustrated this book with the help of my daughter. So I hope you enjoy it because I had a great time creating it. And of course, you can get this on Amazon. So let's begin now. This book is dedicated to Bravery, my niece. It should be stated here that I will likely read some of these sentences incorrectly. And you're just going to go along with it, especially because you should be sleeping and not paying attention to how I'm messing up. Glad we got that out of the way. Once upon a time, there was a little princess named Mavery who was known for her kindness, her intelligence, bravery, see what I did there, and her creativity. Plus, she was one of the most hilarious people in the entire world. As her comedic aunt, I feel like I'm uniquely qualified to attest that she is, in fact, one of the most hilarious girls in the entire world. She lived happily in a kingdom with her little dog named Sadie. Sadie had puppies, and Mavery named her favorite puppy Sparkle Pony. I do want to let you know that Mavery actually does have a puppy named Sparkle Pony. That is her puppy's real name, and it is a boy, and we love that for him. I'm gonna struggle to turn the page because reading softly and turning pages is difficult. Give all the ASMR girlies their flowers because this is harder than it looks. On Mavery's 8th birthday, she would become queen of a kingdom called Pupper Popsicle. In this kingdom, none of the puppies ever grew up. Popsicles never melted. Cotton candy was always cottony. And there was no homework ever in the history of life. As the queen, she would eat snacks for breakfast, and she would never have to take a bath. It should be noted here that of all the creatures that live on this beautiful earth, children should be the number one creature required to bathe, and yet, for whatever reason, they fight this so hard. They would rather run away, kicking and screaming, than to wash themselves of the goo, debris, and general germs that have collected on their body throughout the day. It also should be stated here the odd occurrence that when children actually do get in the bath, they never want to get out of the bath. Make that make sense? Anyway, she could watch TikTok videos all day and stay up as late as she wanted. With her royal title, she would love all the puppies in her kingdom. She would wear pajamas and hoodies all day, every day, and she would never have to get up to get dressed to go to the grocery store. Again, a side quest that I do feel like is relevant at this moment. What is it with children not wanting to wear pants? Because as soon as you see a toddler without pants, you can assume there's a parent somewhere that just gave up. The way that children kick to just not do basic things is quite perplexing. And also, equally as confusing, the children that do want to wear hoodies, regardless if they live in Florida and it's 100 degrees outside. I will say a funny story about this particular child that we're talking about in this story is we were going to watch her cousins, my children, play a sport, and it was 50 degrees outside. This child refused to put on appropriate clothing for this venture. And so when we got to the field, she was shockingly, and I quote, freezing. We happened to prepare for this precise moment almost like we knew it was going to happen. She did watch the entire game wrapped in a blanket, and we did take pictures. Anyway, back to the story. Meanwhile, as the kingdom prepared for Mavery's coronation, a super evil bad guy with stinky breath that smelled like broccoli heard Mavery would become the queen. He envied her title and wanted to steal her crown, give her a wedgie, and become the most powerful evil bad guy in the whole world. Even though he was a super evil bad guy, his name was Steve, which wasn't a very bad guy name. Steve once tried to have his name changed to Fartanio Moradoro because he thought it sounded cooler and more like a bad guy. But then the other bad guys started calling him Fartmore, which was the worst. He could never get them to stop, and thus he became the worst named bad guy ever. Even his jumping spider, Sir Reginald, had a better bad guy name than Steve. It should be noted here that Sir Reginald will be hiding in all of the other pages in this book. So you have to really look for him because he's little, but he's adorable. And he's even featured on the back of the book. Anyway, even so, Steve wanted to be the all-powerful puppy king and have all the puppies love him and not Mavery. Plus, he hated when popsicles melted because it got all over his hands, and then the other bad guys would call him Sticky Steve. So, the super evil bad guy Steve conspired a plan to snatch Mavery's crown, take her to the land of extra chores, eat all of her snacks, steal the popsicles, and not share even one with anyone ever. Now, on this page, we do have some really fun details that I want to point out to you. First, we have Mavery here wearing a t-shirt that is her field trip shirt to her school that she loved to wear. Next, we have her table of snacks with ice cream, popsicles, and cotton candy. Up top, we have an image of her kingdom with a royal decree that says no homework, no bedtime, snacks, and pajamas and popsicles, which honestly is such a vibe, and I don't fault kids for wanting to wear their pajamas all day because I do live that life some days. If you look closely here, you can see a few Legos, and that is actually an important detail, foreshadowing what's about to happen next. Now we're at the coronation with balloons and streamers and a birthday cake coronation style. On Mavery's coronation day, lurking in the shadows was evil, stinky breath Steve. As Mavery prepared to be crowned and thus wear pajamas every day forever, she took off her shoes and socks. Just as she did, Steve quickly threw a handful of Legos right under her feet. Mavery stepped down right on the toys. She was not aware of Stinky Breath Steve's evil plot. She gasped, flailing her arms into the air, responding to the sharpness of the toys. She barely survived, or at least that's what you would have thought, with her dramatic display of ouchness. And while she was distracted, Steve swooped in, snatched her crown. If you look closely, you can see the Legos under her feet. But I did draw her with socks on, and I should have drawn this with just her feet because she just stepped on the Legos. And now you know detail, continuity that I missed, which probably isn't the first one, and that's fine. As you can see here, Steve is wearing her crown, and notice he's holding a very small juice box, which is not a very bad guy thing to have. Bad guys normally don't have juice boxes, so he's just not good at this at all. I think he should find a new vocation. He let out a sinister laugh for an awkward amount of time because he was terrible at being a bad guy. He instantly regretted not having practiced his sinister bad guy laugh prior to this moment. He clutched the crown in his greedy little fingers and finally placed it on his head in the most extra, non-villainous way. "Give me my crown back," Mavery demanded, squinting her eyes with "thou shalt notness" and glaring at the mischievous furry elf that looked like a green bean that had been left out in the sun for too long. See her glaring right there. Her hands are on her hips, and Steve is glaring back, wearing the crown. Steve promptly put up one finger in the air and declared triumphantly, "I am the king now, King Vartanio Moradoro." Suddenly, at the mention of his name, Mavery began to remember the stories she had heard about a greedy, furry goblin smelled like broccoli, and she realized who stood before her. "Wait a second. Are you Mavery said, taking a small step towards the tiny Grinch wannabe before Steve interrupted. No, Steve said firmly, pointing his fuzzy green finger at her, trying to stop her from speaking. Yes, you are, Mavery continued. Don't say it, Steve protested. You are Fartmore, Mavery said loudly. Again, Steve doesn't like that nickname, but that is what his reputation was. So now let's turn the page and see what happens next. On this page, we have one side that is pink to represent Mavery, and on the other side, we have green details to represent Steve. At the top, both of their feet are facing towards each other, but Steve is wearing fuzzy bunny slippers. As soon as she said his name, the sneaky green weasel with a bad case of bedhead stomped his foot in frustration. Once again, what he thought was a super cool bad guy name made him sound ridiculous. Ugh, Steve grunted, stomping away angrily, wearing her crown. This was the beginning of the war of Mavery versus Steve, the war of good versus evil for the rule of Pupper Popsicle Kingdom. Mavery felt so angry that Steve took her crown. Mavery felt so angry that Steve, the walking fuzzy spinach smoothie, took her crown, that she decided to find a way to distract him long enough to take it back. At the bottom of this page, we have a tray of baking happening. We have 6 chocolate chip cookies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have multiple measuring spoons and a bag of sugar. And that is foretelling about Bravery's plan to get her crown back. Mavery decided she would prank Steve and bake him what looked like chocolate chip cookies. After she quickly whipped up a batch of cookies, she went to find King looks like he's a walking pickle. She brought Steve the entire jar of fake chocolate chip cookies and giggled, watching her plan unfold. When Steve took a big bite of the cookie, the horror from the squishy old grapes that were liars pretending to be chocolate appeared on his face. Distracted by the gross old dried up grapes that he thought were chocolate chips, Mavery reached up and took the crown back. So she made raisin cookies, hoping Steve would think they were chocolate chip cookies. This story comes from my own personal disappointment, finding out that cookies that look like chocolate chip cookies are actually raisin cookies. And thus my world has entered this pretend world. Let's see what happens next. This page is full of all sorts of fun details depicting the back and forth that is about to take place between the two of them. Mad at his mini demise, Steve left ice cubes on the ground and Mavery stepped on them with her socks on. That is one of my least favorite minor inconveniences that happens a lot in my world because, as you know from my comedic videos, my ice and freezer hate me. So they just spit out ice cubes and I step on them melted in my socks almost weekly. While Mavery was distracted by super cold toes, Steve snatched the crown back. Frustrated, Mavery took all the bread in the entire kingdom, leaving Steve with only the ends for his sandwich. I don't like the ends of bread for my sandwiches. And I have opened up the bread to find that's the only bread that was left. That's what happens when you have kids that don't like crust bread either. While he was annoyed by his only end of the bread sandwich, Mavery took her crown back. Steve took Mavery's headphones and left them tangled in a mess, while Mavery sat untangling them for what felt like 100 years. Steve stole the crown back. On this page we have the crown, ice, some leftover Legos. We also have a juice box, cookies, and we have spilled ice with bread. And of course the crown is getting moved all around the page to represent. It's going back and forth between them. Mavery drank all the juice in the fridge except for one sip. So when Steve tried pouring more than 2 drops of juice, Mavery took the crown back. Steve changed the Wi-Fi to the slowest internet possible, while Mavery waited forever for one of the browsers to load. Steve snatched the crown back. This particular line I put in there because it's a reference to something that I say a lot, which references one of the best movies that I grew up watching, which was Sandlot. There's also a few other things in this book that I say a lot, like thou shalt not, and I will point out those words to you as we continue forward. I hope every time you have to sneeze, you lose it and can't, Mavery yelled in frustration. Let me tell you, coming up with Minor Inconveniences for this book was one of my favorite parts because there are so many small things that really do bring obnoxious amounts of annoyance to me. One in particular is losing a sneeze, which I feel like sneezes in general are already so dramatic for no reason. Well, I hope every time you enter a room, you forget why you went there in the first place, Steve yelled back sarcastically. I hope every time you put on your shoes, you have a small pebble in it and can't find it. Now, these are really, really horrible things to wish upon someone. And I will say, as you're mourning, it does get worse and more funny as it continues on. Now, this page is full of things that you might recognize from the comedic videos that I create. Things like a printer with heart-shaped sunglasses. And also, there are tape and scissors here, which are characters that you know and love. Well, I hope when you eat pizza, all of the cheese slides off. Steve clapped back. I hope someone eats granola bar in your bed and gets crumbs in it, Mavery said, crossing her arms. Well, I hope you lose the remote in the couch and you can't find it for days. That's another video I created. The remote control getting lost. Well, I hope every time you need the tape and scissors, you can never find them, Mavery said, with a smirk on her face. I hope every time you need to print something, the printer is out of magenta, Steve said confidently, knowing that the only villain worse than him was an actual printer. We all know that to be true, don't we? Mavery rolled her eyes in irritation, just like we all do when printer decides to refuse to do her one job. What Mavery said next was only a wish meant for her worst enemy. I hope that when you try to do a TikTok dance, you can't remember the moves. And I hope you lose the audio that you wanted. As somebody who has done hundreds of TikTok videos. One of the worst things is not being able to find the audio for the video that you had in mind. It is quite annoying, and it is a minor inconvenience. I hope you accidentally post a draft. Now, I have not done this in my video creation process, but it is one of my worst fears because drafts are not ready for the internet. A lot of my skits that I record and I edit them later, and so there's multiple versions of the same line. So I feel like if I did post a draft, it wouldn't be the end of the world. It would just be a very behind the scenes look at my creation process, which might be embarrassing to me depending upon what video it was and how ridiculous I was being. As she said the words, Steve gasped in horror, and she continued on. But most of all, I hope you don't feel small when you stand beside the ocean. And I hope if one door closes, they all close. I hope that if you get the chance to sit it out or dance, I hope you sit it out. Then, finally, after 42 minutes of war, Mavery was so frustrated, she gave up on everything. She ran for about 3 minutes and 21 seconds until she dramatically threw herself on the ground in the middle of the Thou Shalt Not forest. This is one of my favorite drawings in the book. It is Mavery laying face down in the grass of the forest, and her hair is very swirly. And I feel like this is exactly what a dramatic kid looks like when they've given up after doing something for a short amount of time. Once on the ground, in utter extraness, Mavery began to cry and continued rolling around in a major meltdown until a small but very wise voice interrupted her. You know, crying face down on the ground is not the most effective way to communicate your feelings, said a very wise and extremely beautiful queen ant named Aunt Zuzu. Now, I will say here that these characters may or may not be based on people in my niece's life. There happened to be an aunt named Zuzu. My name happens to be Aunt Zuzu. Is there correlation? I don't know. That's yet to be determined and has not been confirmed definitively yet. In the world of ants, there was one that stood out as the most brilliant, and she just so happened to be the queen of this forest. Now, I will say that should this character ever be connected back to me, there are some things that her and I do have in common, and I'll let you decide what those things are. Plus, she was hilarious, so it made her even cooler to little girls, especially ones named Mavery. What in the world of over-the-top theatrics is going on here? The ant said, with wide eyes and raised eyebrows. Why are you rolling around with such dramatic display of nope? Because Fartmore stole my crown, Mavery said, sounding muffled by the ground she was face planted on and being the absolute most. Now he's the king. She wears a pink cape and a pink dress and a crown, and she is interacting with Butterfly. Mavery continues, and now he's the king of the puppies, and all the puppies love him more than me, she said, ground crying, slightly sniffling. Plus, Mavery said, lifting her head finally, he's gonna banish me to the land of extra chores. Wait, are you talking about Fartmore, Steve? The wise ant replied. You're kidding me, Smalls, she said playfully. Sounds like you're quite upset at the theft of your head decor, she said empathetically. I like this page too because of all the pink flowers and the tree. I feel like it just is very whimsical and fun. And I liked adding the details on this page and drawing this and shading this hair in was really fun. I have sent this exact image to my niece in a text when she's being dramatic, which I think fits. It's okay to cry, the aunt continued, and when you're done, just remember what you wear does not define who you are. I like on this page that as the aunt is talking, she got a little bit bigger, and I wanted to kind of depict that what she is saying helps the problem feel smaller, because when we get support in our life, it helps us process the big feelings we have, and then those feelings can move through us and get smaller. Did you forget who you are? The wise, gorgeous aunt said with a coy smile. I suppose you have, since you're currently face planted on the ground. It looks like you're giving up. I do give up. I decide if I give up. I decide, Mavery said, still face down. Giving up? That's gonna be a nope, your royal, being the most majesty. I'm not even queen anymore, Mavery said, still muffled and looking defeated. It's not what you wear that makes you a queen. You are who you are, no matter who says you're not, Queen Aunt Zuzu said confidently. Mavery slowly lifted her head from the dirt, realizing the wise little queen was right. She finally stood up after being upset for a full 90 seconds, and with a small smile of determination, she marched all the way back to her kingdom, ready to take her crown back once and for all. A detail on this page that you might not know is that when we feel big feelings, it takes about 90 seconds for our nervous system to process them. And a lot of times when we feel feelings, our natural reaction is to not feel them. But if we feel them fully, most of them move through us within 90 seconds. And that's why I put 90 seconds in there. Let's see what happens next. On this page, Steve is standing in a big green throne wearing the crown, and all of the decorations that used to be pink and colorful are now green because that's Steve's favorite color. And if you look closely, Sir Reginald is right here, and Sir Reginald has a tiny, tiny spider crown. When she reached the hairy mess of green spaghetti noodles, she took a deep breath, and with as much sass as you can imagine, she declared, I am the queen. You cannot change who I am by wearing my crown, she proclaimed boldly. Steve's eyes grew wide with shock as she declared with confidence, I am the queen, no matter what I wear. Seeing her confidence and bravery, Steve was shooketh. For the first time ever in the history of his life, he was speechless. Now, I personally say in the history of life often. So I went ahead and included these things that I say, so that when my niece read this, she would have subtle nods to the things that we joke around about in our life together. On this page, Mavery is big and she is wearing her crown. She's wearing her blue dress with a purple sash, and her side ponytail matches her dress. Mavery grabbed the crown off of his green juice box looking head and glared at him. Thou shalt not try and take my identity ever again. And with that, Mavery banished Steve to the land of extra chores, where he had to fold endless fitted sheets that never folded, vacuumed the floors with a vacuum that had a short cord, and didn't suck hardly anything. He had to wipe down tables with paper towels that always tore halfway through the job, and even had to try and match socks, even though the dryer took one of each of them and turned them into Tupperware lids. Again, those are some nods to the jokes that we tell on the internet together. So Steve is on this page doing all those chores. In the land of extra chores, there's a mop and dishwasher and handheld vacuum. The bed is not made here, and there are clothes on the bed. There's a duster. There's a table with spilled items. It looks like a cereal spilled up there. A broom. And Steve is there with all of his cleaning supplies. Now we're back to Mavery's party with all of the colors that she loves. She's wearing her crown. She's holding her favorite puppy sparkle pony. She's wearing a hoodie and she has a popsicle. And if you look here, she even has the bunny slippers that Steve was wearing, which implies he not only took her crown, he had taken her slippers as well. Also, Aunt Zuzu is here as well. So that day, Mavery had the biggest, most magical Queen birthday celebration any girl ever dreamed of. She was given incredible gifts, but none as wonderful as the wisdom of Queen Aunt Zuzu. Mavery shared all the popsicles with the entire kingdom and with her best friends, brother and sister cat named Gyros and Maylee. That is referencing my kids and her cousins. Sadie's puppy friend Moosey even joined in on the fun. And Moosey is a reference to my dog named Lucy. There are some fun things on this page that I want to point out to you as well. First of all, we have the party with the presents and all the beautiful colors. But a secret character that you don't know about is this guy right here. I have been drawing him for years, and I have a story that I'm creating around him as well. But he is there holding a balloon, and he kind of looks like a little tiny cricket, but I'm not really sure what he is. That party was one of the most fun celebrations the kingdom had ever had. Everyone wore pajamas, of course, did TikTok dances, and stayed up as late as they wanted. Sparkle Pony the puppy even got his own puppy ice cream. And so the kingdom of Pupper Popsicle had its queen ruling and loving the puppies, and everything was right in the kingdom until Steve made his way back into the kingdom. To be continued. Now, this is where a lot of stories tend to end. But for me, when I was a kid, I always loved learning more about the characters because it made me feel like I could relate to my favorite ones. So in this book, I added an entire character section that has character details about each character specifically. And I made it as if the character was filling it out. So on this page you have Mavery. She is age 8. Her favorite things to wear are hoodies, even when it's 1,000 degrees. Her favorite color is blue, which is why you see her wearing a blue dress throughout this whole book, because it's one of her favorite colors. Her secret talent is making up silly impressions of friends and families on the spot. That is actually one of my niece's secret talents. She's known for an infectious laugh. Fun fact, my dog's name is actually Sparkle Pony. The minor inconvenience she is most guilty of causing is leaving one sip of juice in the fridge, putting the container back. I have seen her do this personally, and I tease her about it. Her best friend is Sadie the dog, of course. Her biggest fear is Steve, and as you can see here, she drew a little character of Steve right there, which I think is really funny. Her hobby is making friendship bracelets. Her favorite popsicle flavor is orange and strawberry. And her favorite holiday is her birthday. Her favorite food is chocolate cake. And her favorite books are hilarious adventure stories, especially ones with brave heroes. And her nicknames are at the bottom. loved creating these pages because it let me really have a lot of fun, especially with this page that features character details about Stinky Steve. This one was filled out by Steve, but as you can see, Mavery took some time to write her own thoughts about them here. She also was teasing Steve by adding a lot of things he would not add. So instead of his name being the name he would want, you have Mavery's thoughts here. She calls him Farmer Steve. He says his age is old and his favorite thing to wear is a crown, of course. His favorite color is puke green, and his secret talent is being the most. And Mavery, of course, crossed out, being the most powerful villain of all time. So instead it just says he's great at being the most. He's known for playing the accordion, which is questionable to Mavery. His fun fact is that he has a pet jumping spider that he loves, which is really cute. Minor inconvenience most guilty of? Mavery says it's being annoying, but he says being the best villain of all time, which obviously she crossed out. Over here we have broccoli sticker, which Mavery put on there, and it says, guess who this is? And she said, you. Best friend, my spider Sir Reginald, which Mavery drew this picture of Steve here, and also included Reginald there as his pet spider, which I think is cute. Hobbies: plotting world domination, creating evil schemes, or practicing my sinister laugh. Favorite popsicle flavor are the green ones, which Mavery says yuck, and I tend to agree with that. Favorite fruit is broccoli, and Mavery says ew, gross. Favorite book is The Mean Grinch Parts of How the Grinch Stole Christmas. So Steve's hero is the Grinch, but just like the mean parts of the Grinch. Nicknames is the most evil bad guy that Mavery crossed out, and then they have a little back and forth here, which I think is really cute. Stop writing on my page, Steve says to Mavery, and Mavery says no. And Steve says, I mean it. Take your stupid doodle crayons off my side. And she says no. He says, fine, I'm gonna break your crayons. And she says, so? I've got a whole box. Not if I break them all. You have to find them first. Which I think is fun. They kind of act like siblings a little bit. This broccoli here is another sketch by Mavery saying that Steve is like broccoli, which I think is funny. So all of the characters have these character pages, including Queen Aunt Zuzu and even Sadie the puppy. And Queen Aunt Zuzu is wearing a sparkling crown. And on Sadie's page has her footprints and spilled paint. One thing that I added as well that I love is a spot for kids to create their own characters, which I would have loved something like this as a kid, so I wanted to make sure to include it. Where you can draw yourself with the crown and then answer questions about yourself here. Another thing that I added to this is a place for you to draw your side character, and the back is actually something that my husband helped me decide to do, which is a glossary, because he is a teacher. It has more details about the things I reference in this book. So this is a note from the author, which is me, and I will read it to you now. It says, Dear reader, this book was inspired by the joy and laughter of countless bedtime stories I told to my niece Bravery, who always begged me to tell her just one more story. We spent hours together laughing about characters whose names always sounded like people we knew, even her name sometimes, but of course, it was just a coincidence, and the characters were not based on anyone that she knew. I wanted to create a story for her and for other whimsical, hilarious kids like her that not only entertains them, but also encourages them to embrace their creativity and imagination. That's why I included Minor Inconveniences in the story, to show that even the smallest obstacle can be overcome with a little bit of humor and resourcefulness. I hope this book inspires children to find joy in the little things, to laugh at life's minor inconveniences, and to never give up on their dreams. And who knows, maybe it will also inspire some silly bedtime stories of their own. Thank you for joining Mavery on her hilarious adventure. May it bring a smile to your face, just as telling my niece's bedtime stories brought a smile to mine. With love, Julie's story. Little page that you see a little secret on, and that is, of course, Sir Reginald right here. And that is the end of our little bedtime story. I hope by now you have dozed off into beautiful sleep, and I hope that you enjoyed the reading of my first children's book. I am hoping to write many more stories and to make many kids laugh, even if those kids are young at heart like you and I. So thank you again so much for listening to this story, and I hope that it helped you get some much needed rest. Alright, until next time, thank you for requesting this video. I love making videos for you that are at your request, so please let me know if you'd love to see more story times like this, and or what stories you would want me to read. And thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe, and also share this video with not only somebody that would enjoy a story like this, but also somebody who might need a little bit of relaxing story time to help them rest. Thank you again so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.